Let me take you on a journey, a story of contrasts, compassion, and connections that defy the boundaries of wealth and adversity. Imagine this: a billionaire, accustomed to life's luxuries, crosses paths with a homeless woman struggling to shield her baby from the relentless rain. This chance meeting sets off a chain of events that would transform both their lives and serve as a testament to the power of kindness, empathy, and love. In today's story, we'll explore how one unexpected moment became the turning point in two drastically different lives, through themes of compassion, forgiveness, and the unyielding strength of the human spirit. This narrative invites us to question the true meaning of success and purpose. By the end, you might just find yourself reflecting on your own capacity for connection and growth. Before we dive into this deeply moving tale, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel for more stories that inspire and ignite the soul. If this story resonates with you, comment below with this phrase: "Compassion transforms lives, including my own." Now let's embark on this unforgettable journey together. The city was cloaked in an unyielding drizzle that afternoon, painting the world in muted grays. On such days, the wealthy often found themselves insulated by the warm confines of private cars, bustling only between luxurious offices and opulent homes. Edgar Fontaine, a billionaire real estate magnate, was no exception. Seated in the back of his chauffeured car, he scrolled through the notes for an upcoming meeting, a critical deal that promised to redefine the skyline of the city and cement his legacy. Yet fate has a way of inserting itself when least expected. At a red light, his gaze wandered out the window, landing on a scene that jarred him from his routine. A woman, her clothes soaked through, clutched a baby to her chest. Her frail frame shivered as she tried to shield her child from the downpour with a battered piece of cardboard. Edgar could see her lips moving, likely pleading for help, but the sound was drowned out by the symphony of rain and car horns. His first instinct was to look away. After all, wasn't the world full of such moments? Yet, something about her, a quiet dignity in her desperation, pierced through his habitual detachment. Without fully understanding why, he leaned forward and spoke to his driver. "Stop the car." The driver, startled but obedient, pulled over just as the light turned green. "Sir," he started, "we'll be late for your meeting." "I'll deal with it," Edgar interrupted. He stepped out, umbrella in hand, and approached the woman. "Ma'am," he said, his voice measured but warm, "do you have somewhere to go?" She looked up, startled. Her face was pale and gaunt, but her eyes held a fierce protectiveness as she clutched her child closer. "No," she said simply. Edgar hesitated. He wasn't used to these situations, yet his next words surprised even himself. "Here." He pulled a key from his pocket, a key to the mansion his late father had left him, a place he visited rarely as it held too many memories. "Take this. There's food, warmth, and space to stay. Tell them Edgar sent you." Her eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and suspicion flashing across her face. "Why would you do this?" He paused, unsure how to articulate the answer even to himself. "Because no one should have to endure this," he said finally. "Especially not with a child." The transaction lasted less than a minute, but its weight lingered long after Edgar returned to the car. As they drove off, he couldn't help but glance back at the woman, now holding the key as if it were a lifeline. His assistant's voice over the car's speaker brought him back to the present. "Mr. Fontaine, the investors are waiting. Are you on your way?" "Reschedule," he said curtly, ignoring the stunned silence that followed. For reasons he couldn't yet articulate, Edgar knew he had just made a choice far more significant than the deal awaiting him. As evening fell, Edgar found himself in the same mansion he had sent the woman to earlier. He had given her the address on an impulse, but now his curiosity pulled him to see if she had arrived safely. When he opened the door, the sight that greeted him was far from what he expected. The woman sat in the grand living room, the baby asleep in her arms. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, his expression pale and shaken, was Edgar's father's longtime caretaker, Mr. Alcott. "Sir," Mr. Alcott said, his voice trembling with urgency, "this young lady saved my life. I had a heart attack earlier today, and she called for help. If she hadn't been here, His voice broke off, but the gratitude in his eyes spoke volumes. Edgar turned to the woman, who now seemed even more fragile under the golden light of the chandelier. You stayed and helped? She nodded. I couldn't leave him like that. I thought if you were kind enough to help me, I should do the same. In that moment, the weight of what had transpired began to sink in. A fleeting gesture, born out of impulse, had not only provided shelter, but also saved a life. Edgar was struck by the profound interconnectedness of their actions, as if fate had woven their paths together with deliberate intent. But this was only the beginning. Unbeknownst to Edgar, this seemingly random encounter would unravel a story far richer, deeper, and more transformative than he could ever imagine. What motivated Edgar to extend such kindness to a stranger? What secrets lie in the depths of Stella's life? And how will they shape the road ahead for both of them? The answers will challenge everything you think you know about compassion and the rippling effects of a single act of humanity. Stay with us as we uncover a story of resilience, redemption, and the power of connection. On the surface, Edgar's decision to help Stella might have seemed impulsive, even reckless, to those who observed it. After all, billionaires are not generally known for their willingness to veer off the course of meticulously planned days, let alone risk derailing a high-stakes business deal. But for Edgar, this moment was anything but random. It was the result of a lifetime of lessons instilled by his late father, Robert Fontaine, a man whose belief in compassion often clashed with the cold, profit-driven world of real estate. Robert had always told Edgar that success meant little without a foundation of integrity and humanity. Son, he would say, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience, you can own every skyscraper in the city, but if you can't see the people at street level, you're not truly wealthy. These words echoed in Edgar's mind as he sat in his car that afternoon, watching Stella struggle against the rain. It wasn't just the weather she was battling, it was a system that seemed designed to overlook her entirely. But Edgar's gesture, as profound as it was, carried its own complexities. As he observed Stella and her baby in his father's mansion later that evening, he couldn't help but wonder about the circumstances that had brought her to this point. How does a person, seemingly no different from anyone else, find themselves so utterly adrift? The thought unsettled him. He had spent years insulating himself from the harsh realities of the world outside his gated communities and private boardrooms. Yet here, in the quiet opulence of his late father's home, was a stark reminder of the fragility of human existence. Stella's story began to unfold over the following days, piece by piece, like a puzzle coming together. She had once been a promising architecture student, brimming with dreams of designing homes that could withstand time and disaster alike. But life, as it so often does, had other plans. A series of cascading misfortunes, her father's untimely death, her mother's illness, and the crushing weight of medical debt, had forced her to abandon her studies. From there, the descent into homelessness had been swift and merciless. Hearing her recount this, Edgar was struck by a profound sense of injustice. How could someone so full of potential, someone who had once walked the same university halls as many of his colleagues, end up in such dire straits? He found himself grappling with questions he had long avoided. Was his own success merely a product of privilege and circumstance? And if so, what responsibility did he bear toward those who hadn't been afforded the same opportunities? As he pondered these questions, Edgar began to notice something remarkable about Stella. Despite everything she had endured, she carried herself with a quiet resilience that bordered on defiance. She refused to let her circumstances define her, even as they threatened to overwhelm her. Watching her care for her baby, an infant who knew nothing of poverty or wealth, only the warmth of a mother's love, Edgar felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. It was this hope that led him to take another leap of faith. He reached out to a friend who managed a shelter for women and children, hoping to learn more about the systemic challenges faced by people like Stella. What he discovered was both eye-opening and disheartening. The shelter, though well-run, was perpetually underfunded, with a waiting list that stretched into months. Resources were scarce, and the staff often had to make impossible choices about who to help and who to turn away. Edgar found himself wondering how many lives could be transformed with just a fraction of the wealth he and his peers often took for granted. The idea planted a seed in his mind, one that would take root and grow in the weeks to come. But for now, his focus remained on Stella. He began to involve her in the daily operations of the mansion, not as a servant or a guest, but as a partner. He encouraged her to use the library, a vast room filled with books on architecture, engineering, and design. He even arranged for a tutor to help her refresh her skills, should she decide to pursue her studies again. Stella was hesitant at first, wary of the strings that might be attached to such generosity. But over time, she began to trust that Edgar's intentions were genuine. This trust, however, was not one-sided. Edgar, too, found himself placing a kind of faith in Stella, faith that she would rise to the occasion, that she would not squander the opportunity he was offering. It was a gamble, to be sure, but one that felt increasingly worth the risk. Their interactions also began to change Edgar in ways he hadn't anticipated. He found himself questioning the relentless pursuit of profit that had defined his career. Was it possible to build something enduring and meaningful without sacrificing others in the process? Stella's determination, her refusal to give up even in the face of overwhelming odds, became a kind of mirror for him, reflecting his own potential for growth and transformation. By the end of their first month under the same roof, an unspoken bond had begun to form between them. It was not yet friendship, but it was something deeper than mere acquaintanceship. It was a shared understanding, a recognition of each other's humanity that transcended the vast gulf of their circumstances. And yet, Edgar knew this was only the beginning. Helping Stella regain her footing was one thing, but what about the countless others who remained invisible, their struggles unnoticed by the world at large? The weight of that question lingered in his mind, a quiet but persistent reminder that one act of kindness, no matter how impactful, was never enough on its own. As Edgar wrestles with these newfound questions about wealth and responsibility, he will soon discover that Stella's story is far from over. What hidden strength lies within her, waiting to be unveiled? And how will their journey together challenge the very foundations of Edgar's beliefs about success and purpose? Stay tuned as we uncover the next chapter of this extraordinary story. The following weeks brought an unusual rhythm to Edgar's life, one that contrasted sharply with the meticulously scheduled days he had grown accustomed to. Instead of back-to-back meetings with architects and investors, his time was now punctuated by quiet conversations with Stella and laughter from her baby echoing through the halls of his father's mansion. The opulence of the home seemed less imposing now, as if the warmth of their presence had softened its grandeur. One evening, as Edgar returned from a day spent at his company's office, he noticed the house seemed unusually quiet. Stella, who had grown comfortable with her daily routines in the mansion, was nowhere to be seen in the main rooms. Edgar found himself unexpectedly concerned. It was an odd feeling, the sense of responsibility for another person's well-being. He shook it off and headed toward the kitchen, expecting to find her preparing dinner or feeding her child. Instead, he found Mr. Alcott, his father's former caretaker, seated at the kitchen table, a glass of water trembling in his hand. Edgar froze at the sight of the older man's pallor. "Alcott," he said, his voice tinged with urgency. "Are you all right?" Alcott looked up, and the relief in his eyes was immediate. "Sir, I'm fine now," he began, his voice unsteady. "But earlier I wasn't. I collapsed in the living room. It was Stella who found me. She called for help, stayed with me, and made sure I was stable until the paramedics arrived. I owe her my life." The words struck Edgar like a thunderclap. He hurried to the living room, where he found Stella sitting on the couch, her baby asleep in her arms. Her face was calm, but the weariness in her eyes betrayed the stress of the day's events. When she saw Edgar, she offered a tentative smile. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," she began, before Edgar could speak. "I didn't know what else to do." "You saved him," Edgar said, his voice low but steady. "Stella, you saved his life." She shrugged, as if dismissing the magnitude of what she had done. "It was the least I could do. He's been so kind to me and my baby." For a moment, Edgar could only stare at her, awed by the simplicity of her words. This woman, who had so little herself, had extended a kindness that few others might have. It was a humbling realization. Later that evening, Edgar sat in his study, reflecting on the day's events. His father's home had always been a place of memories, some joyful, others bittersweet. Tonight, it felt like the house had taken on a new meaning, one that echoed his father's long-held belief in the interconnectedness of human lives. Robert Fontaine had often spoken about the importance of small, seemingly inconsequential acts of kindness. Every gesture, he had once told Edgar, is like a pebble dropped in water. The ripples spread far beyond what we can see. Edgar had always dismissed it as sentimental idealism, but tonight he understood. Stella's intervention had not only saved a life, but had also brought to light the profound impact one person could have on another. It made Edgar question how often he had overlooked opportunities to make a difference. How many times had he driven past someone like Stella, thinking they were just another face in the crowd? The following day, Edgar made a point to sit down with Stella and thank her properly. As they talked, he found himself wanting to know more about her life before the streets. What had shaped her into the resilient, selfless person she was today? Stella hesitated at first, but eventually she began to open up. She spoke of her childhood, a time when her family had been close-knit and full of dreams. Her father, a carpenter, had taught her the value of hard work and creativity, often letting her help with his projects. Her mother, a schoolteacher, had instilled in her a love for learning. But those days had ended abruptly when her father passed away in a work accident. The loss devastated the family, and the financial strain that followed only deepened their struggles. "I thought I could hold everything together," Stella said, her voice tinged with regret. "I tried to work and study at the same time, but it wasn't enough. And when my mother fell ill," she trailed off, the weight of her memories evident in her expression. Edgar listened intently, his own heart heavy with the knowledge of how easily circumstances beyond one's control could derail a life. Stella's story was not unique. There were countless others like her, people whose lives had been upended by forces they couldn't fight. "Stella," he said after a long pause, "you've been through more than anyone should have to endure. And yet, here you are, still fighting, still giving. That's extraordinary." She looked at him, her eyes brimming with a mixture of gratitude and vulnerability. "I've learned that life doesn't wait for you to catch up," she said softly. "You just have to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it gets." That night, as Edgar stood by the window in his study, he found himself thinking about his own life. He had always prided himself on his achievements, his ability to turn visions into towering skyscrapers. But what had those accomplishments truly brought him? Wealth, yes. Recognition, certainly. But purpose? Fulfillment? He wasn't so sure anymore. Stella's courage and resilience have begun to reshape Edgar's perspective on life. But the challenges ahead are far from over. What hidden strengths will Stella reveal as she continues her journey? And how will Edgar's growing awareness of his own privilege shape the decisions he makes moving forward? Join us next time as we delve deeper into this extraordinary tale of human connection and transformation. In the days that followed heroic intervention, Stella began to emerge from the protective shell she had built around herself. Her initial hesitancy to engage with Edgar and the household staff gave way to quiet confidence, a slow but deliberate unveiling of the person she once was before the weight of life's adversities bore down on her. For Edgar, witnessing this transformation was both inspiring and humbling. One morning, as the sun poured through the large bay windows of the mansion's study, Edgar found Stella seated at the grand mahogany desk. She wasn't idling or merely flipping through pages. She was intently studying a large, faded architectural blueprint from the library's archives. Her fingers traced the lines and measurements with a precision that betrayed her familiarity with the craft. It was as if, in that moment, she had slipped into a version of herself that had long been buried under layers of survival and sacrifice. Fascinated by old designs, Edgar asked, stepping into the room with a cup of coffee in hand. Startled, Stella looked up, but her expression quickly softened into a sheepish smile. "I hope I didn't overstep. I've always loved architecture. I used to dream of designing spaces that weren't just beautiful, but also meaningful places where people could truly feel at home." Her words hung in the air, resonating deeply with Edgar. He set his coffee cup down and gestured toward the blueprint. "That one's from my father's early days in the industry. He designed affordable housing projects before he expanded into commercial real estate." Stella's eyes lit up. "Affordable housing? That's incredible. I always believed architecture should serve people, not just profit margins." Edgar chuckled, though her earnestness struck a chord. "You'd have gotten along with my father. He believed the same thing, even when it wasn't the most lucrative path." This conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Edgar began to see Stella not just as someone in need of help, but as a person brimming with untapped potential. She, in turn, started to trust Edgar more, viewing him not as a distant figure of privilege, but as someone willing to bridge the gap between their worlds. As the days turned into weeks, Stella began to share more about her life before homelessness. She spoke of her university days, where she had been a promising student in the architecture program. Her professors had praised her innovative ideas and her ability to blend form and function seamlessly. But when her father died and her mother's health began to deteriorate, Stella had no choice but to leave school to take on multiple jobs. "I thought I could juggle everything," she confessed one evening as they sat in the mansion's garden. "But life has a way of piling on more than you can carry. I lost my home, my education, and eventually, my sense of who I was." Edgar listened in silence, his respect for her growing with each word. It was one thing to read about systemic inequality or hear abstract statistics about homelessness. It was another entirely to sit across from someone who had lived it and come out the other side with their dignity and humanity intact. "What kept you going?" he asked, genuinely curious. Stella looked down at her hands, which were folded neatly in her lap. "My daughter," she said simply. "Even on the worst days, when I didn't know if we'd eat or find shelter, I knew I couldn't give up. She deserves a better future, and I'll do whatever it takes to give her that." This unwavering determination was, perhaps, Stella's greatest strength. It was a quiet resilience, not the kind that shouted or demanded recognition, but the kind that endured silently, day after day. Edgar couldn't help but admire it, even as it made him question his own fortitude. He began to think about the systems and structures that had allowed someone as talented and driven as Stella to fall through the cracks. The more he learned about her story, the more he realized how narrow his own perspective had been. He had spent his career focused on building monumental structures, but he had rarely considered the lives of the people who occupied them. Inspired by Stella's passion for architecture, Edgar decided to take a bold step. He reached out to one of his company's partners, a prominent architect who had worked on several major projects. Together, they arranged for Stella to visit a nearby architectural firm, where she could observe and learn from professionals in the field. At first, Stella was hesitant. "I'm not sure I'm ready," she said when Edgar proposed the idea. "It's been so long since I was in that world." "You're more ready than you think," Edgar replied. "And besides, the best way to find your footing again is to start walking." With his encouragement, Stella agreed. The visit proved to be a transformative experience. As she walked through the firm's bustling office, surrounded by drafting tables, computer-aided design screens, and models of upcoming projects, she felt a spark she hadn't felt in years. The architects she met were welcoming and impressed by her knowledge, even suggesting she consider enrolling in evening classes to complete her degree. When she returned to the mansion that evening, there was a newfound lightness in her step. "I'd forgotten how much I love this," she admitted to Edgar. "It's like a part of me I thought was lost is coming back to life." Edgar smiled, genuinely happy for her. "Then let's make sure that part of you has every chance to thrive." Over the next few weeks, Edgar began to invest more directly in Stella's future. He arranged for her to enroll in an online program that would allow her to finish her degree while still caring for her daughter. He also provided her with a modest stipend, ensuring she could focus on her studies without worrying about day-to-day survival. For Stella, these gestures were more than acts of generosity, they were lifelines. They represented a second chance, not just to rebuild her life, but to reclaim the dreams she had once set aside. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, she faced it with a renewed sense of purpose and hope. Stella's resilience and determination have sparked a transformation, not just in her own life, but also in Edgar's understanding of the world around him. But as their bond deepens, they will soon face challenges that test the limits of their newfound partnership. What unexpected twists lie ahead, and how will they navigate the complexities of trust, ambition, and redemption? Stay with us as this remarkable journey continues. The mansion had always been a place of grandeur, its marble floors and sweeping staircases designed to impress anyone who crossed its threshold. But in recent months, it had transformed into something much more meaningful, a haven for new beginnings. Stella, once hesitant to occupy such a space, now moved through it with a quiet sense of purpose. Her days were filled with study, childcare, and a budding determination to rebuild the life she had once dreamed of. Edgar, too, had changed. The man who had once measured his success in square footage and profit margins now found himself reevaluating his priorities. He spent more time at the mansion, not because it was an escape from the demands of his business, but because it had become the center of something he had long been missing: connection. One evening, as the two sat in the study, Edgar placed a sleek laptop on the desk in front of Stella. "I've been thinking about your next steps," he said, his tone both thoughtful and deliberate. "You've already started rekindling your passion for architecture, but I want to make sure you have everything you need to succeed. This is for you." Stella's eyes widened. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice tinged with gratitude and disbelief. "I know," Edgar replied, "but I want to. You have the talent and the drive. The least I can do is remove some of the obstacles in your way." The laptop was more than a gift. It was a symbol of trust and belief in her potential. With it, Stella dove into her studies with a vigor that surprised even herself. She began tackling coursework late into the night, poring over textbooks and drafting designs that reignited her creative spark. Her daughter, now toddling around the mansion, became both her greatest joy and her greatest motivation. But progress was not without its challenges. Stella often found herself battling self-doubt, questioning whether she truly deserved the opportunities she had been given. On one particularly difficult day, when a complex assignment left her feeling overwhelmed, she confided in Edgar. "I'm not sure I can do this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I fail? What if all of this is for nothing?" Edgar leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Stella, you've already faced challenges most people can't even imagine, and you're still here. That says more about your strength than any degree or accomplishment ever could. Failure isn't the end. It's just a step on the way to success." His words struck a chord, and Stella found herself reflecting on the truth of his statement. She had weathered storms far more brutal than the one she faced now. With renewed determination, she returned to her work, this time with a deeper understanding of her own resilience. As weeks turned into months, Stella began to see tangible results from her efforts. She excelled in her courses, often receiving praise from her instructors for her innovative designs. Edgar, ever the mentor and supporter, encouraged her to think beyond her immediate goals. "What's your ultimate vision?" he asked one afternoon as they reviewed one of her projects. Stella hesitated, then said, "I want to design spaces that give people dignity, places where they feel seen, safe, and valued. Too many people live in conditions that strip them of those basic rights. I want to change that." Her words resonated deeply with Edgar. They reminded him of his father's early projects, which had focused on creating affordable housing for underserved communities. Inspired by Stella's vision, Edgar decided to take action on a larger scale. He proposed a partnership between his company and Stella, one that would not only fund her education, but also support the creation of housing initiatives aligned with her ideals. The project, which they named Haven, aimed to provide affordable, sustainable homes for families in need. Stella was initially hesitant to accept such a monumental offer. "I don't want to feel like I'm just a charity case," she told Edgar. "You're not," Edgar replied firmly. "This isn't charity, it's collaboration. Your ideas and your passion are what make this project possible." Without you, it wouldn't exist. With his reassurance, Stella embraced the opportunity. Together, they began working on the first phase of the project, which focused on transforming an abandoned lot in the city into a vibrant community space. Stella's designs blended functionality with beauty, incorporating green spaces, communal areas, and energy-efficient features that made the development both livable and sustainable. As the project gained momentum, Stella found herself stepping into a leadership role she hadn't anticipated. She met with architects, planners, and community leaders, advocating for the importance of the initiative. Each meeting boosted her confidence, and each success reinforced her belief in her own capabilities. For Edgar, watching Stella's growth was nothing short of extraordinary. She was no longer the hesitant, uncertain woman he had met in the rain. She had become a force of change, someone who inspired others through her determination and vision. Their partnership extended beyond professional collaboration. Over time, Edgar and Stella developed a deep bond built on mutual respect and shared values. They often spent evenings discussing not just their work, but their hopes for the future, their fears, and the lessons they had learned from their respective journeys. One night, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the mansion's garden, Edgar turned to Stella and said, "You've taught me more than you realize, about resilience, about purpose, and about what it means to truly make a difference. I'm grateful for that." Stella smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "And you've shown me that kindness can come from the most unexpected places. It's changed everything for me and for my daughter." Their exchange was simple, but it carried the weight of all they had experienced together. It was a reminder that their journeys, though different, had converged in a way that was both transformative and profound. With their shared vision driving them forward, Edgar and Stella seem unstoppable. But as their project gains attention, unforeseen challenges threaten to derail their progress. What trials await them, and how will they navigate the complexities of ambition, trust, and the ever-present shadows of their pasts? Stay with us as the story continues to unfold. The success of the Haven project marked a new chapter, not only in Stella's life, but also in Edgar's. The once quiet mansion now buzzed with activity as the two collaborated on designs, held meetings with stakeholders, and celebrated milestones with the team they had built. It was no longer just a house. It had become a symbol of what could be achieved through trust, compassion, and shared purpose. But amidst the bustle of their work, a quieter, deeper transformation was taking place. Over time, Stella, Edgar, and his father's former caretaker, Mr. Alcott, began to form a connection that defied traditional definitions of family. Stella often marveled at how Mr. Alcott, despite his advanced age, brought a sense of stability and wisdom to their unconventional household. He had taken a special interest in her daughter, whom he affectionately called Little Miss Sunshine. The bond between the two was heartwarming, with Alcott often regaling the toddler with stories from his youth, or teaching her how to tend to the garden outside. One evening, as they gathered for dinner, a new tradition that had replaced Edgar's solitary meals, Alcott raised his glass of water in a toast. "To family," he said simply, his voice carrying a quiet conviction that brought a lump to Stella's throat. "Family," Edgar echoed, his gaze lingering on Stella and her daughter. It was a word that had taken on new meaning for all of them. For Edgar, it was a reminder of his late father's teachings and the legacy of compassion he had left behind. For Stella, it was a promise of stability and belonging that she hadn't dared to hope for in years. And for Mr. Alcott, it was a testament to the enduring power of connection, even in the most unexpected circumstances. Yet, as close as they had become, their bond was not without its challenges. Stella still carried the scars of her past, and there were moments when old fears and insecurities crept in. She sometimes worried that this newfound sense of family was too good to be true, that it could all be taken away in an instant. Edgar, too, wrestled with his own doubts. His feelings for Stella had grown deeper than he anticipated, and he often found himself questioning the nature of their relationship. Was it simply a partnership born of mutual respect, or had it become something more? One evening, as they worked late in the study, Stella broke the silence with a question that had been weighing on her mind. "Why do you care so much, Edgar?" she asked, her tone hesitant but curious. "About me, about my daughter, about any of this?" He looked up from the plans they were reviewing, her question catching him off guard. For a moment, he considered deflecting with humor, but the sincerity in her eyes demanded an honest answer. "Because you remind me of what matters," he said finally. "When I first met you, I was so caught up in my world, my deals, my deadlines, my own ambitions. But you showed me that life is about more than that. It's about people, about connections, about making a difference." Stella's expression softened, and she nodded, as if she understood more than he could put into words. Their bond deepened further one fateful afternoon when Stella received an unexpected visitor at the mansion. Her estranged younger brother, Michael. She hadn't seen him in years, not since their family had splintered under the weight of loss and hardship. The sight of him standing on the doorstep, his face a mixture of guilt and hope, brought a flood of emotions rushing to the surface. "I heard about the Haven Project," Michael said, his voice tentative, "and I thought, maybe it was time to find you, to say I'm sorry." For Stella, the reunion was bittersweet. She had spent years resenting her brother for what she perceived as abandonment. But now as she looked at him, she saw not just the pain he had caused, but also the pain he had endured. Edgar, sensing the weight of the moment, stepped back to give them privacy. But later, when Stella confided in him about her mixed feelings, he offered words of comfort that stayed with her. "Forgiveness isn't just about the other person," he said. "It's about freeing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment. It's not easy, but it's worth it." In the weeks that followed, Stella and Michael began to rebuild their relationship, slowly but steadily. Michael even became involved in the Haven Project, using his skills as a carpenter to contribute to the community spaces Stella had designed. The experience brought the household even closer together, with Michael joining their evening dinners and sharing stories that reminded Stella of their shared childhood. For Edgar, it was a chance to see Stella in a new light, not just as a survivor, but as someone capable of mending even the deepest wounds. As their unconventional family grew, so did their shared vision for the future. The Haven Project expanded to other cities, its success drawing attention from media outlets and philanthropic organizations. Stella often found herself in the spotlight, her story inspiring others to believe in second chances and the power of resilience. Through it all, the bond between Stella, Edgar, and Mr. Alcott remained unshakable. It was a bond forged not by blood, but by shared experiences, mutual respect, and a commitment to uplifting one another. One night, as they sat around the fireplace, Alcott turned to Edgar with a twinkle in his eye. "Your father would be proud, you know," he said. "Not just of the work you're doing, but of the man you've become." Edgar's throat tightened at the words, but he managed a smile. "I hope so," he replied, glancing at Stella and her daughter. "Because for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm living up to his legacy." As the bond between Edgar, Stella, and their makeshift family deepens, new opportunities and challenges loom on the horizon. How will they navigate the complexities of love, ambition, and forgiveness as they continue their journey together? Stay tuned as the story unfolds, revealing the next chapter of this extraordinary tale. The auditorium was filled with a sense of anticipation. Rows of seats were occupied by families, friends, and faculty members, all gathered to celebrate the graduating class. Among the graduates was Stella, clad in her cap and gown, her face a mixture of pride and disbelief. The journey that had brought her here had been anything but ordinary, and as she stood in line waiting for her name to be called, her mind replayed the moments that had shaped her path. When she had first enrolled in the online architecture program, she hadn't dared to dream of this day. It had seemed like an impossible goal, a far-off reward meant for someone else. But here she was, not just receiving her degree, but doing so as the valedictorian of her class. The applause of the crowd brought her back to the present, and as her name echoed through the hall, Stella stepped forward to accept her diploma. The applause grew louder, but her focus was on two familiar faces in the crowd, Edgar and Mr. Alcott. Edgar's expression was one of quiet pride, his arms crossed as he leaned back in his seat. Alcott, ever the emotional one, clapped enthusiastically, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Stella's daughter, seated beside them, waved excitedly, her small hand clutching a bouquet of daisies meant for her mother. As Stella took the stage to deliver her valedictorian speech, the room fell silent. She adjusted the microphone, her hands trembling slightly, and took a deep breath. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. "Today is not just a celebration of our achievements, but a reminder of the journeys that brought us here. For many of us, the road to this moment was not smooth or easy. It was paved with challenges, sacrifices, and moments of doubt. But we made it, and for that, we should all be proud." The audience responded with nods and murmurs of agreement. Stella paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "My journey has been unconventional, to say the least. A few years ago, I was living on the streets with my daughter, unsure of where our next meal would come from or how we would survive the next day. It was a dark and uncertain time, one that tested every ounce of my strength. But in the midst of that darkness, I encountered people who believed in me, even when I struggled to believe in myself." Her gaze shifted to Edgar, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. "Those people didn't just offer me help, they offered me hope. They reminded me that even when life feels insurmountable, there's always a way forward. And it is because of their kindness, their support, and their unwavering faith in my potential that I stand before you today." The crowd erupted into applause, but Stella held up a hand, signaling that she wasn't finished. "There is one more thing I'd like to say," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "This diploma isn't just a piece of paper. It's a symbol of resilience, of second chances, and of the power of community. And I hope that as we leave here today, we carry with us the understanding that success is not just about what we achieve for ourselves, but what we contribute to the world around us." Her words hung in the air, resonating deeply with everyone in the room. As she stepped away from the podium, the standing ovation that followed was thunderous. But the most significant moment of the evening came not from Stella's speech, but from an unexpected reunion. As the ceremony concluded and graduates began mingling with their families, Stella spotted a figure standing near the back of the auditorium. It was a woman, her posture hesitant yet hopeful, her eyes scanning the crowd as if searching for someone. Stella's breath caught in her throat as recognition dawned. It was her mother. The years had aged her, but there was no mistaking the woman who had been Stella's earliest source of love and guidance. For a moment, Stella stood frozen, unsure of how to react. The memories of their estrangement, of the arguments, the misunderstandings, and the pain flooded back. But beneath those memories was a yearning that had never truly faded, the longing for reconciliation. Her mother took a tentative step forward, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "Stella," she said softly, her voice trembling, "I'm so proud of you." The words broke through the barriers Stella had built around her heart, tears streaming down her face. She closed the distance between them and embraced her mother tightly. "I've missed you," Stella whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I've missed you too," her mother replied, her own tears falling freely. The reunion was both a moment of healing and a reminder of the cycles of forgiveness and renewal that defined their family story. Watching from a distance, Edgar and Mr. Alcott exchanged knowing glances, their expressions a mixture of relief and joy. That evening, as they gathered back at the mansion for a small celebration, the atmosphere was one of warmth and gratitude. Stella's mother joined them at the dinner table, her presence a symbol of the bridges that had been rebuilt. They laughed, shared stories, and marveled at how far they had all come. Later that night, as Stella tucked her daughter into bed, she reflected on the events of the day. The diploma resting on her desk was more than just an academic achievement. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of love, compassion, and forgiveness. Stella's graduation marks a significant milestone, but it is far from the end of her journey. As she steps into a new chapter of her life, new opportunities and challenges await, including a profound decision that will redefine her relationship with Edgar. What lies ahead for this unlikely family as they continue to navigate the complexities of love, purpose, and ambition? Stay tuned as the story unfolds. As the celebrations of Stella's graduation subsided, life at the mansion resumed its steady rhythm, though the air seemed lighter. Each member of their unconventional family had found a renewed sense of purpose. But for Edgar, something deeper had shifted. Stella's speech had lingered in his mind, particularly her words about success being measured by what one contributes to the world. It wasn't just inspiring, it was a call to action that Edgar couldn't ignore. For years, his focus had been on building skyscrapers and expanding his real estate empire. Yet, despite his accomplishments, there was a hollowness to his achievements, a feeling that no amount of wealth or recognition could fill. Now, for the first time, Edgar felt compelled to use his resources to create something truly meaningful, something that aligned with the values Stella had so eloquently described. One morning, as they sat in the garden sipping coffee, Edgar turned to Stella with a contemplative expression. "What if we could do more?" he asked, his tone thoughtful. Stella raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "More in what way?" "More than just haven," he explained. "What if we could create a foundation dedicated to helping people like you, people who've been overlooked by the system, but have the potential to thrive if given the right opportunities?" Stella's eyes lit up. "That's ambitious," she said with a smile. "But it's also exactly what the world needs." Encouraged by her enthusiasm, Edgar began sketching out the framework for what would become the Fontaine Foundation. Its mission was simple yet profound: to empower individuals facing adversity by providing them with education, housing, and career opportunities. Stella, with her first-hand experience and newly acquired expertise, became an integral part of the planning process. Their days were consumed with meetings, brainstorming sessions, and site visits. Stella's designs and ideas became the blueprint for the foundation's housing projects, while Edgar leveraged his connections to secure funding and partnerships. Together, they envisioned communities that were more than just places to live. There were places to grow, connect, and rebuild lives. But as the foundation began to take shape, it also brought its share of challenges. Not everyone in Edgar's professional circle was supportive of his new direction. Some of his business partners questioned the profitability of such ventures, while others viewed his philanthropic efforts as a distraction from the company's core operations. "You're risking everything you've built for a passion project," one executive warned during a tense board meeting. Edgar remained resolute. "It's not a risk, it's an investment," he replied firmly. "If we can use our resources to create real change, then we're doing something far more valuable than just turning a profit." Stella, who had accompanied him to the meeting, was struck by his conviction. It was a stark contrast to the man she had first met, who had seemed so focused on his own success. This Edgar was driven by a sense of purpose that went beyond himself, and it only deepened her respect for him. As the foundation's work expanded, so did the bond between Edgar and Stella. They often found themselves working late into the night, their conversations drifting from logistical details to more personal topics. Edgar shared stories of his father, whose values had shaped his newfound outlook, while Stella opened up about her dreams for the future dreams she had thought were lost, but now felt within reach. One evening, as they reviewed a proposal for a new project, Edgar looked up from his notes and said, "You know, this foundation wouldn't exist without you." Stella smiled, though her expression was tinged with humility. "I think it's more accurate to say it wouldn't exist without us. This has been a partnership in every sense of the word." Her words carried a weight that neither of them acknowledged outright, but it was clear that their connection had grown deeper than either had anticipated. Amid their shared successes, Stella continued to make strides in her personal life. She had reconnected with her brother, Michael, who had become an active supporter of the foundation's projects. Their relationship, once strained, was now a source of strength and encouragement. She also found herself becoming a role model for others in her community. Her story, now widely known thanks to the media attention surrounding Haven and the Fontaine Foundation, inspired countless individuals to believe in the possibility of second chances. Stella often received letters from people who had faced similar struggles, and she made it a point to respond to as many as she could. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was from a young woman named Clara, who had recently escaped an abusive relationship and was struggling to rebuild her life. Clara wrote about how Stella's story had given her hope and the courage to pursue her own dreams. Reading the letter brought tears to Stella's eyes. She shared it with Edgar, who immediately suggested reaching out to Clara and offering her a place in one of the Foundation's programs. "She's exactly the kind of person we're here to help," he said. For Stella, Clara's story was a poignant reminder of why their work mattered. It wasn't just about building homes or funding education. It was about transforming lives and creating a ripple effect of kindness and opportunity. As the Fontaine Foundation grew, so did its impact. Communities that had once been neglected were now thriving hubs of activity and hope. Families found stability, individuals discovered their potential, and barriers that once seemed insurmountable began to crumble. Through it all, Stella and Edgar remained at the heart of the Foundation's efforts, their partnership a testament to the power of empathy, resilience, and shared purpose. With the Fontaine Foundation flourishing and their bond stronger than ever, Edgar and Stella find themselves at a crossroads. What will the future hold for their partnership, both professionally and personally? And how will they navigate the challenges that come with their growing influence and the evolving nature of their relationship? Stay tuned as the next chapter delves into the transformative power of love and redemption. The early morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the mansion, casting a warm glow on the wooden floors. Stella stood in the living room, her gaze lingering on a framed photo of the Haven Project's inaugural community opening. It was a picture of triumph, of lives transformed through shared vision and determination. Yet, as she looked at the image, a realization began to take root in her heart, a realization that her partnership with Edgar had grown into something far greater than she had ever anticipated. Their bond had always been unique, built on trust, respect, and a shared purpose. But in the quiet moments, over late-night brainstorming sessions, shared dinners, or simply watching her daughter play in the garden, Stella had felt a deepening connection that defied simple explanation. It was no longer just gratitude or admiration. It was something more profound, more personal. Edgar, too, had found himself grappling with emotions he hadn't expected. For years, his life had been defined by ambition and achievement, leaving little room for vulnerability or personal connection. But Stella had changed that. Her resilience and compassion had awakened a part of him he thought had been buried beneath the weight of his responsibilities. One evening, as they walked through the garden discussing plans for a new community center, Edgar hesitated, his usual confidence giving way to a rare vulnerability. "Stella," he began, his voice quiet, "I've been thinking a lot about what we've built together, not just the foundation, but everything. Our partnership, our friendship." Stella turned to him, sensing the weight of his words. "It's been incredible, hasn't it?" she said, offering him an encouraging smile. "It has," Edgar agreed, "but I think it's become more than just a partnership for me. You've changed the way I see the world, the way I see myself, and I don't think I can imagine my life without you in it." The admission hung in the air, both unexpected and inevitable. Stella felt her heart race as she processed his words, her own feelings mirroring his. For so long, she had been focused on rebuilding her life and providing for her daughter that she hadn't allowed herself to consider the possibility of love. But now, standing in the garden under the soft glow of the moonlight, she realized that Edgar had become an integral part of her journey, a source of strength, inspiration, and belonging. "I feel the same," she admitted softly, her voice tinged with both certainty and vulnerability. "You've been there for me in ways I never thought possible, and I don't think I can imagine my life without you either." Their confession marked the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. What had started as an unlikely alliance born of compassion and circumstance had blossomed into a love built on shared values, mutual respect, and a deep understanding of one another's strengths and vulnerabilities. As they navigated this new phase, they faced challenges that tested their bond. The demands of the Fontaine Foundation continued to grow, requiring them to juggle their professional commitments with their personal relationship. Media attention also intensified, with reporters eager to scrutinize their dynamic and speculate about their future. But through it all, Edgar and Stella remained steadfast. They approached their relationship with the same openness and honesty that had defined their partnership from the beginning, addressing conflicts head-on and supporting each other through moments of doubt and uncertainty. Their love also brought new meaning to their work. Together, they launched initiatives that focused on fostering connections within communities, creating spaces for people to come together, share their stories, and support one another. They believed that true redemption came not just from individual effort, but from the collective power of compassion and understanding. One of the most poignant moments of their journey came during the opening ceremony of a new community center. As Stella stood on stage, addressing the crowd, she spoke from the heart about the importance of second chances and the role that love and connection played in her own story. "This isn't just about buildings or programs," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "It's about the bonds we create with one another, the willingness to see each other's humanity and to lift each other up. That's what changes lives. That's what changed mine." Edgar, watching from the audience, felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Stella's words captured the essence of everything they had worked toward, and they reminded him of how far they had come, not just as individuals, but as partners in every sense of the word. Their journey wasn't without its imperfections, but it was a testament to the transformative power of love and redemption. Together, they had not only rebuilt their own lives, but also created a legacy that would continue to inspire others for generations to come. As they stood side by side that evening, watching the sunset from the balcony of the mansion, Edgar reached for Stella's hand. "We've come a long way," he said, his voice filled with a quiet reverence. "We have," Stella agreed, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "And I can't wait to see where we go from here." With their love solidified and their shared vision continuing to flourish, Edgar and Stella embark on a future full of promise. But as they step into this new chapter, they must confront the challenges of balancing their personal lives with the growing responsibilities of their work. What new opportunities and obstacles lie ahead, and how will their bond continue to evolve? Stay tuned as the story reaches its powerful conclusion. Years had passed since Edgar and Stella first crossed paths on that rainy afternoon, a moment that had seemed insignificant at the time, but had irrevocably altered the course of their lives. Now, as they stood on the stage of a grand auditorium filled with supporters, beneficiaries, and collaborators of the Fontaine Foundation, they reflected on the journey that had brought them to this pivotal moment. The event was a celebration of the Foundation's 5th anniversary, a milestone that marked not just its success, but its impact. Over the years, Haven communities had grown across the country, transforming neglected neighborhoods into thriving hubs of hope and opportunity. Families once teetering on the edge of despair now had homes, children had schools, and individuals had pathways to fulfilling careers. Edgar stepped forward to address the crowd, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had come to define him. "When we started this journey," he began, "I couldn't have imagined the profound impact it would have, not just on the lives we've touched, but on my own understanding of what it means to live with purpose. This foundation is not just a project or a legacy. It's a testament to the power of compassion, resilience, and the belief that everyone deserves a chance to thrive." He turned to Stella, his expression softening. "And none of this would have been possible without the woman who inspired it all." The audience erupted into applause as Stella joined him at the podium. She had grown into her role as both a leader and a symbol of hope, her journey resonating with countless people who saw themselves in her story. "Thank you, Edgar," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "And thank you to everyone here who has been a part of this incredible journey. The Fontaine Foundation isn't just about the work we've done. It's about the lives we've touched and the bonds we've created. It's a reminder that no matter how difficult our circumstances, we are never truly alone." The event culminated in the announcement of a new initiative, a global expansion of Haven communities, designed to bring the Foundation's vision to underserved populations around the world. It was an ambitious endeavor, but one that Edgar and Stella felt confident in pursuing. As the evening drew to a close, Edgar and Stella found themselves on the balcony of the auditorium, overlooking the cityscape they had helped reshape. The twinkling lights of the buildings below seemed to mirror the countless lives they had illuminated through their work. "You know," Stella said, her voice tinged with wonder, "I never imagined my life would turn out like this. There were so many times I thought I wouldn't make it. And now it feels like everything has come full circle." Edgar smiled, his hand resting on hers. "It has, but this is only the beginning. There's so much more we can do, so many more lives we can touch." She nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude and hope. "And we'll do it together." Their journey had been one of redemption, transformation, and unwavering belief in the power of human connection. It was a story that had redefined the meaning of success, not as a measure of wealth or accolades, but as the ability to uplift others and create lasting change. As they looked out over the city, Stella and Edgar knew that their legacy would be more than just buildings or programs. It would be the lives they had touched, the barriers they had broken, and the hope they had ignited in the hearts of those who had once felt forgotten. And in that moment, with the world stretching out before them, they felt a profound sense of peace, for they had not only found purpose in their work, but also in each other, a bond that had turned strangers into partners, partners into a family, and a family into a force for good. If this story moved you as much as it moved us, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know how you're making a difference in your own life and the lives of others. Let's keep spreading hope and compassion, one story at a time. Thank you for being part of this journey.